CP Sunrise, what is going on, my family? You know, from sun up to sundown, we rise. And in this community that we are building together, holy crap, we talk about some amazing things. We talk about hard things, and we bring the real when it comes to talking about our lives with cerebral palsy. So I'm super excited for today because we are starting a brand new series. We are talking about sex. Yep, I said it, people. We're all adults here. So, you know, sex is an important thing. You know, oftentimes in life, people think that us as people with disabilities, we don't think about sex. We don't have sex. Sex isn't just part of our life. And there's so many things that come along with sex. One of the most important things we thought was having an expert come and talk about that. And the beautiful thing about our expert for the next 3 weeks is she is someone who also has a disability. So I think we are going to have a great talk. I'm happy to see you. And with that, I will introduce Dr. Michelle Feinin to you. All right,
Hey.
Michelle.
Hey,
how
everyone.
Are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. I'm so happy to be here. I love hanging out with you and talking with you. So this is going to be a great time, and I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And as you heard, I mean, we're talking about something that is a little bit taboo. It's taboo whether you have a disability or not, but especially when you have a disability. People often think it just doesn't exist in our world. So can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of how and why this topic is so important to you?
Yes. So I have a disability myself. I have osteogenesis imperfecta, which is a brittle bone disease, and I was born with it. And because of that disease, I had 35 plus broken bones. I was in a wheelchair all throughout my young adult life. And then, of course, back in it every once in a while as I have some injuries that occur. But with that, I would say personally, I found that the biggest part of my life that my disability really affected was my self-esteem, the way I viewed myself as someone worthy of love, someone that would be good in a relationship. So it really impacted me in that way. And because of that, I really didn't believe that I could be in a relationship. There was a lot said to me or not said to me. And really, it was mostly my perception, if I go back and think about it, as far as how worthy I was of being in a relationship because of my disability. So that's really why I dove into becoming a relationship coach, getting my PhD in clinical sexology. It was something that I've done this work now, and I really want to be able to help other people who feel the same way. And I see in the chat box, it's being asked, is this live now? Yes, friends, we're alive right now. We're hanging out.
Yeah, everybody's used to us coming on at different times. So yes, we are live right now coming to you. And yes, we are talking about what you're hearing us talk about. So don't change the channel. We want to hear from you. We want you to be a part of this conversation, because the beautiful thing is we all have our own stories with that. And so, Michelle, one of the things you just touched on was the idea of esteem, right? Self-esteem. And so I just wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. I think it is so huge. You and I had a talk about this when we did a podcast together about actually being worthy, feeling worthy of love, and that all comes down to self-esteem. But what would you say self-esteem is from your perspective?
To me, self-esteem is just your perception of yourself, and our self-esteem is very much so shaped by society. It's shaped by our culture, different religion, our parents, the people that we look up to as children too. We have a lot of outside influences that really can shape our self-esteem. And I think that for people with disabilities, that ability to separate how society feels about disability in general and to not internalize that can be a really difficult thing. Like, society is not comfortable talking about sex. They're not comfortable talking about disability. You put the two together and it's like minds are just being blown here. We are making people super uncomfortable, but are they uncomfortable with us? How do we not internalize that? Right? So our self-esteem is just how we view ourselves. Are we confident or are we not? And just looking at that continuum of where we may fall on that line.
Yeah, right. And it is a continuum. So it's always about asking the question of, where am I? And some days you're going to be higher up. Let's just say we go to 10. 10 is our max. Some days you're going to be closer to that 10, and some days you're going to be over here at that 1.
Yeah.
Depending on where we fall, it's about, how do I get to the next number? Not how do I go from 1 to 10, but how do I go from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3? I think oftentimes we get very good at just looking at the extremes.
Mm-hmm.
We get stuck. We don't realize there's a lot of room in the middle to play with, and it's okay to be in the middle. So
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that's a very, like, we do get stuck in that black and white thinking. And John in the chat box says low self-esteem kills, especially when it comes to close interpersonal relationships. Absolutely. And when we're saying, oh, I have low self-esteem, I mean, there's such a negative context to even saying that, right? But if we're able to sit with that without judgment and just look at it for what it is, that's really when those shifts starts happening. The shifting starts happening so that we can move from 1 to 2, like you said, and then 2 to 3, with maybe the goal being 10. But how do we get from there, from 1 to 10? That's the tricky part, right?
Yeah. And I think the other part of this that you and I, we've not talked directly about this, but we're diving into this today. We're talking about a different type of self-esteem, right? Which we're going to talk about how, are they the same? Are they different? We're going to dive into that. But you teach and coach a lot into sexual self-esteem. So we've got self-esteem and then sexual self-esteem. So why is it important to make the distinction between the two?
I like that. So the two are actually just very separate, and I can share an example of why I believe that. And it's a little bit about just my own story that may resonate. I personally found that when it came to identifying as a woman with a disability and what I wanted ultimately, which was to be in a relationship, right? So that was like my main goal. And I really did not even know if it was possible. So I started really doing that inner work. But I didn't know that I was doing it. What I really was doing was, I'm going to brain my way through this. I'm going to figure out exactly how to get the guy. I'm going to read all the books. I'm going to study, just male energy in general. And I'm going to figure out exactly what I need to do. And I tried to brain my way through it as a researcher, just kind of like, all right, I'm just going to figure this out. It's going to be great. But until I recognized that the two things were very different, I was not successful in attracting the love that I wanted. So you can try to figure it all out, but if and be this like version of this person who, you know, knows that they're a sexual being, who can identify as that and attract people to them because of it. But if you don't have the self-esteem part, people feel that, you know, it becomes a performance as opposed to you showing up as your authentic self, which is ultimately where the magic happens, right? When we show up authentically as who we are, that's where the connection can really occur.
Man, yeah, that's so powerful. Just the idea of, you know, I love peas, right? I love
You
peas.
do.
So you hit the performing aspect of it, and that's so real. Like, you're performing because you read all the books, and this is what the books said to do.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, the question is, did you actually believe what you were putting out into the world, or did you see it as a performance? And
Right.
when you're performing, that can be really, really tiring, at least from my experience, because it isn't you. You're trying to be someone or something that you aren't, because guess what? Again, something we touched on earlier, those expectations that society has for you and that turned into your expectations for yourself started weighing in on who you needed to perform as, or who you thought you needed to perform as. So
Exactly.
I love that. Let's see, we got a comment coming in. Yeah, let me put this up here. Your perception of yourself affects the view that you can really reach levels of conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Your view of yourself, it kind of is a limit in a way, because if you don't think that you are capable of connecting, or if you truly don't think that you're going to have a relationship, then that door is closed off, and you've closed the door yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with that, Ben. Thank you for that.
So, all right, we've now figured out that these are two separate things. The types of self-esteem are two separate things. So how do I bridge the gap so that it becomes a lot easier to be who I want to be in both areas of my life?
Right. So, and there is a bridge that can occur, right? Because we're talking about self-esteem, and that is also part of sexual self-esteem, right? And a key word in both of these topics is the self. So we have to start with ourself. A lot of our views of ourself is shaped externally, right? By, like I said, society, religion, culture, other people. So we really have to take a good look inward and start there with self-love. And that is really the space where you begin to find that you can use that fake it till you make it practice to get going, but it's only going to get you so far, because until you really hit a level of self-love, that is almost like that key to that door that you have already closed, right? So you hold the key, and it's just a matter of finding how to get through that door, but you got to find the key first. And self-love is certainly a tool that bridges the gap there, to connection, and eventually getting the love that you want, and not doubting if the people who you now are talking to love you because you've performed, right? Because if we get that out of the way, we also eliminate self-doubt. So we're eliminating performing, we're eliminating self-doubt, and it all really begins by loving ourselves in the way that we deserve to.
Yeah, and I think John has a great comment here, and I'm going to put that up, and I'll share from my own personal experience, kind of like, I think I resonate with this so hard because what it made me think of is being in high school, right? Knowing, okay, this is what's supposed to, like, I want to date, right? And then the outside perception of what it means to, or meant at that time, for people to date somebody with a disability, from my point of view, I got treated like the little brother all the time. And so I totally resonate with what you're saying there, John, about it's hard to deal with when you haven't had a lot of success. And so I'm curious, if you're talking to somebody, maybe they're coming in for the first couple of times with you, and you're talking to them about self-love, like, what's one of the first things that you would have us do to start to rep out that practice and build that muscle?
You know, before we even go there, though, I think there's so much to what John said, right? Because, you know, I briefly shared, I didn't think love was in the cards for me. No, I felt at a visceral level in every cell of my body that this was never going to happen. So, John, when you're saying, like, it's really hard to deal with when you haven't had a lot of successes, and then you also feel like you're running out of time. So I feel that. And so, no, you are so not alone in that. And at times when someone is talking about, oh, you just need to love yourself, I remember hearing that, and it did not resonate with me at all, because I was like, I love myself. Okay. And it was extremely, it was almost like, it's okay, honey, like, just love you, and then everyone's going to love you too, and they'll see. No, that's not where we're at. In fact, you called yourself little brother. I used to call myself the mayor of Friendville. I was everybody's friend, never anybody's girlfriend. And again, if you hear even the way I'm talking, I can tap into how I felt. It's that all or nothing, right? Always a friend, never a girlfriend. I feel it. So I feel you, John. And so that's the space that I was in. Until you're able to process where you currently are at, you don't get to love, right? So it's not like we start with self-love. We have to see where we're at on that continuum for self-esteem. Am I down at 1 or am I at a 10, right? Self-love is that bridge from maybe like the 9 or 10, because we want to be realistic with our expectations, right?
Yeah.
So that's that bridge when we're going from self-esteem, we're taking self-love then and getting us over to sexual self-esteem as well. So there's that. And I love the conversation.
I tell you what, man, I think everybody that's in the chat right now, they were in our meeting when we were talking about what we were talking about doing for this, because everybody's leaving some great stuff. I want to throw Jamie's stuff up here because I think that's important. Like, step 1, dating. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is important that first, like you said, figure out where we are, right? We have to have an awareness of where we are. And it's like the idea that oftentimes if you're at a 1, what you think that is bad. Like, people think that that's bad. It's not good. It's not bad. It just means you're at a 1. You get to decide what that means. But oftentimes we let the expectations that have been built by society and then accepted by us create the meaning of that. So I think figuring out where you are, if it's a 1, great, it's a 1. But, and Bill said it too, you have to know what you want. And so when it comes to the dating, do you want to date? What do you want?
Right.
That's important.
Are you looking for a life partner? Are you looking for something casual? Are you just looking for sex? Let's be clear on exactly what it is that we're looking for, because until we know what we're looking for, we're not going to find it. We're going to be using the wrong map. You know, it's like you're trying to get here, but you're using a map to get you here. So we really want to make sure that we align those things as well. And Ben, I just feel you so much. Ben's like, this is me. I've been down about this really bad. You are not alone. This is why we're having this conversation, because we've been there. And I think also it's very easy for us to see different people in our lives that are getting what we want, and it can be disheartening. But if it's something that we know about having disability, it's that we don't do things on the scheduled timeline. It may look different for everyone. And just because you're a 1 now doesn't mean it's going to take you extra long to get to a 10. It may you might find someone that's at a 4 and they will stay there for the rest of their lives. But if you are a 1 and you're willing to dive deep and do this work, and it's work, you could get to a 10 too. So I really just want everyone to know that. And Jamie said, yeah, you have to be okay with some failure. And I think that as a community, we may be super gritty when it comes to some things, like maybe bouncing back with our own health. But then maybe when it comes to dating, we haven't yet learned how to apply that grittiness to the same, to, you know, in that arena of our lives.
Yeah, man, that's so powerful. It made me think of, so you and I met on Clubhouse.
We sure did.
We've been in a lot of these conversations, and that grit, somebody else talked about that, and they're like, when you talk about sex, when you talk about dating, and you talk about relationships, oftentimes it's messy, it's not pretty, it is gritty, it's grimy. And I was like, man, that's absolutely right. And what he said in that moment was, you know what? That's beautiful, because a lot of what we deal with on a daily basis is gritty, grimy. Like, we figure out how to make those adaptations. But again, I still think it comes down to, what do you want? I think that's the most important question from today is, what do you want? Where are you at on that scale? And then along the way here, we're going to be building tools. We're going to help you rep out some of that stuff so that you can start to move along the line and get where you want to be. Let's see, we've had some stuff come in here.
Yeah, and just as you pull that up, and hey, Scott, good to see you. As you mentioned just how things are messy, right? A shift that happened for me, and I talk a lot about shifts because that's what we're essentially doing. We're shifting our mindset here so that we can shift up that continuum from maybe a 1 being, I'm not feeling that great about myself when it comes to being a sexual being. And then to a 10, it's messy. But as a community, we have this ability to adapt, right? And to find ways. And because of that, and I've said this now, and I really believe it more and more every time I say it, that people with disabilities can make the hottest lovers ever. Yeah, I just said it. Loud and proud, I'm saying it, because with the ability to be open to that and open to just working with what is in front of us, we find our ways in, out, around things. We find a way, right? And I think the more that we're able to settle into that superpower of navigating some uncomfortable or awkward situations, the more we can realize, like, that's pretty sexy. Having grit like that, that's hot. You know, Nathan and I, we had a great conversation about what's sexy that is not like a physical attribute. And we had such a wonderful conversation about that, how confidence is sexy, how grit is sexy, how someone handles themselves or shows up or is kind can be such a hot and sexy thing. And, you know, in some ways, disability can make us better at those things than other people who have not been presented with those challenges that they've had to learn. So that's just my plug for people with disabilities being hot and sexy. And I believe it. I do.
Can you feel it, everybody? I can feel it. That's why I moved it to the single screen there, because it was so powerful and coming through. And man, we hit with a lot of stuff really, really quickly here. I've been loving watching everybody come through and share their experience. I love hear what John said here about that he would date a woman with CP for a number of reasons. And I think this comment goes back to, again, knowing what you want, right?
Yes.
And the more you know that, the more you can find the person that's meant for you, that relationship. And when Michelle and I first talked on No Label Live, one of the things we talked about, we had a lot of car analogies. And one of the things you said was, it may not mean that only one car is meant for you. And I think that's important to realize too, that it goes back to the self-esteem. You may know what you want. I think often we can get caught in the idea of, hey, somebody showed me some attention, so I'm going to choose that person because they're the first person that showed me attention. And so I think for me, that's what is important in knowing what you want, knowing who you are, is knowing where your boundaries are, and not sinking, not going below what your standards are for what you want.
100%. And, you know, I think that there's a beauty to the thought of being in a relationship with someone who really gets us on that level, someone who maybe has the same diagnosis. There would just be a level of understanding that, wow, right? And I think that would be a beautiful thing. So I would not discredit being with someone who has my disability. But the only thing that I would invite people to sift through on their own, and it's going to look different for every person, is, have you been told that because you have a disability, you have to be with someone who has a disability? Ooh. You can only date other people who have disabilities. And for a long time, you know, I believed that to be true. And I would go to these conferences and I'd be like, well, I guess this is where I'm going to find my husband. This is the only place. And it's a biannual conference. So once every 2 years, I have the ability to find them. No pressure, though. I'm going to be totally normal in all conversations. And I hate the word normal because that's just the setting on the washing machine. But I digress. What that did was it shaped the way I showed up in those conversations too. So it's important that we do this type of self-reflection. And I would encourage it to be done with people who can hold a safe space for you for the stuff that bubbles up, because it bubbles up and we do a really great job of hiding the things that we fear. We operate 95% in the unconscious realm of just those tapes playing in the background, and we're unconscious of them. So being able to find the time and the space to do this deeply healing work with people that can support you is huge. And I love what Scott said here. As you think, so you shall become. If you think you're attractive, you become attractive. And I do agree with that.
Yeah. So. There's so much to be said for the inner game. Like, life is really all about the inner game. When it comes to all things, the way that we view ourselves is the way that other people are going to view us. And it's the same thing with all the things that we've talked about. The boundaries that you set, like they're rules that you have for your life. And the more we allow people to abuse those boundaries, I mean, we are what we tolerate type of deal. That's what I think. And I think it is just about, I think the success is in that middle ground. It's about realizing that you don't have to be on either extreme, and realizing to play somewhere in the middle, because that gives you room to experience either way. When you're on the extreme, you have nowhere to go on both sides of it. You can only go one way. And I think you got to play where you have some room on either side. Success.
I like that. Let's see. We've got John saying, are there places where other CPs are? I think you're asking if there are places. I mean, you're in one currently. Like, how beautiful is technology that it can unite us so much, especially given this time where some of us are still home and avoiding going out, you know? So I think that online can be a fantastic place to meet people. I met my husband online, actually. I met him on Match.com back when it was like on the computer, not even an app for your phone yet. So if that speaks to my age, that's where we're at, folks. So it's definitely, and that's something to navigate too, like on a whole other level. How do we, as people with disabilities, navigate online dating? That's a whole other conversation, right? Jamie says interabled relationships are great. Don't limit your dating pool, especially if you're just getting started. I agree with you, Jamie. And my husband does not have a disability, but he understands me the best he can without having my diagnosis. And sometimes you don't necessarily need to have someone understand that, as long as they're open to learning what that may be like, you know? We all have our own stuff.
Yeah, and that made me think of something that we heard on the Clubhouse streets too, and I think it's relevant here. Somebody was talking, we were talking specifically about online dating, and we were talking about disclosing our disability, right? And one of the most powerful statements that I heard in that was, I tell the person who I'm dating or who I'm like pursuing to see if it's going to be a good fit, I tell them the information when it's relevant.
Yes.
I thought that was so powerful, because some things aren't going to be relevant at times. And again, you guys can tell I'm really about these extremes. I think we take it to the extreme a lot, where we share everything all at once. And that can be to our detriment, because then there's no mystery about who we are, even. If we share everything all at once up front, then, I mean, how would you feel if somebody was telling you all this stuff, like boom, boom, boom? Probably like a deer in the headlights type of deal. So.
Yeah, it might be heavy in the beginning, especially before someone knows us, because they're still getting to know us too, you know? I think it's so often that we're really just speaking from our own insecurity of like, well, I got to get it all out there, but then we're not considering how that might feel on the other end. And for those of us with disabilities, maybe our experience has been that we've had to just share a lot of personal information, you know, either with doctors or just in order to advocate for ourselves. There's this level sometimes of what even is my personal information. And, you know, our bodies are sometimes not even personal, and we can kind of lose touch with that because of disability and just medical trauma, things of that nature. So it's important for us to consider, like, does that play a role in how I show up on my dates, even, or even in my profile before I'm having dates? How does it show up for me? So I think that's important to look at too.
Yeah. And so as we start, we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to ask this question to you directly. So expectations, are they getting in our way?
Yes. Do our expectations get in our way? Yes. I think that we have to have reasonable expectations. Expectations can get in the way a couple of different ways. You know, recently, if you haven't listened to Nathan's talk yet with Vera Lee, I would encourage everyone to check that out. Oh, and also follow him on Instagram, because if we could kick him off to 1,000 followers, that would just be a personal goal of mine. He's 5 away, friends.
Yeah.
5 friends away. I mean, he's dropping some amazing gems on there, and I know that you're probably blushing.
I want to get to 1,000 on the Clubhouse streets. Okay.
Well, let's get you there in both. But anyway, I veered off track a little bit there. But something that you said that resonated with me so deeply was this idea that, like, of the bar, right?
Yeah.
And it's that expectation of like setting the bar low or setting the bar high. And did we set this bar? Did society set this bar? Is there even a bar? Does there have to be? You know, that question that you posed, I think, was so important. And I'd love for you to kind of jam out on that if you could, because it was so good.
Yeah, I think, well, first, it's all from my muscle motivator days, the bar and lifting the bar, right? But so often, my experience has shown me that as people with disabilities, we talk about raising the bar all the time. And we talk about raising the bar from a societal standpoint. Like, society should be raising the bar for us and our treatment. And in reality, I think when we get so focused on that, we lose a bit of potential, because again, when we have a bar, there's a limit there, right? And already, most of the time, people assume that we're going to fail and we are not going to be able to do something. So our bar is really low. Half the time it's on the ground and we're just kicking it down the road. And I actually think that's a beautiful thing, because when there's already an expectation that we're not going to do something, why not use that to our advantage and say, hey, people already think I'm not going to be able to do this, so let's try it and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Because if I want to do it, I should try and do it. I think we get so focused on things like Nike and just do it, right? There is no try. I think that's bullshit. To be completely honest, I think it's okay to try. I think trying is a form of doing, but it's doing without the expectations of an outcome. And half the time in this realm of dating, relationship, sex, when we get focused on the doing, here's what happens, at least from my experience. We say, yeah, I really want to date somebody. We get that we find that person that shows a little bit of interest. We're starting to connect. But where did we go? We're already married with 3 kids and the house and all that bullshit, and we don't actually realize that, hey, that person might be seeing other people. It's not really that serious yet, but we take it to the extreme. And I think sometimes just show up and be present with the people in front of you and forget about, I have to have this by this time, or I have to play by the schedule that society says I need to. And you only do that when you start to not care that much about the bar.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's important to note too that this isn't something that's exclusive to people with disabilities. This is a major mindset thing that exists when we're looking for love, just for people of all abilities. And that is one of the biggest things that I work with people on, is this idea of not right. And Jamie says, able-bodied people don't have it any easier. They struggle with the same thing. We're on the same page, Jamie, right?
Yeah.
We're sharing one mind wave here, brain wave. And it's true. And I think sometimes when we do fail, let's call it a failure. Was it really? Because if we didn't expect to have this happen any other way, and the real reason we went on this date was to just go on the date, then you succeeded, right? And there's a level of practice that is needed in order to show up as your authentic self. If you're not going on dates regularly, that's an uncomfortable thing. This is new to you. So allowing yourself room for failing forward, I believe it was Scott said in the chat box. So yeah, Jamie says, we're not as special as we like to think. And it's easy. It's so easy to go there, right? When it's like, oh, they don't like me because of my disability. And that's something that I can't change. Okay, but there's a level of what you can change, and it comes from doing this self-reflection, this work. It's all hard. I call it work because it's hard, but it's all hard. So choose your hard. Do you think it's harder to be sitting there alone, or is it harder to date? Choose your hard.
Ooh.
That's where I'm at.
Ooh. I know that probably hit somebody square in the face.
It hit me before. That's why I'm saying it. I'm like, someone needs to hear it. That's where I was at. I would never put myself out there. And then I was like, I don't know why I'm alone. I would never. I was waiting for someone. We used our car analogy. I wanted a car, but I was waiting for a car to drive off of a lot and park in my driveway for me. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's beauty in serendipity. Like, you might meet them at like the store or whatever, but you got to go to the store first too. So it's hard, but again, it's not as hard if we work on things together. you know?
Yeah. I mean, and that whole waiting for it to happen, right? I think we also get caught in the, if I just want it bad enough, it will show up. And you have to take action for things to show up. Even if you want it, nothing's going to happen if you just sit there and say one day. Well, one day only happens if you get off your ass and do something about it. Like as blunt as that is, like nothing changes without action. Yeah. Yeah, right? Jamie said it right there, and I'll put it up there for everybody to see. Yeah, sometimes when you're thinking, oh, they don't like me because I've got a disability. No, they don't like you because in that moment you showed up like an asshole.
Yeah, I guess people with disabilities aren't immune to being an asshole as well. But I want to touch on what John said here, where it's like 60 is a tough start. And I can feel that. And I can understand that feeling of like, there's not enough time. And I think if any of us have dealt with maybe grief or loss in life, we can relate to that feeling of there's not enough time, because there's not enough time with people that we care about. We get that sense of just how short life is. And that can really play into our feelings of anxiety around dating. But what I will say is that I've had the pleasure of working with people who are just now starting that inner self work, who are in their 60s, who are in their 70s, who have finally, either because they've just lived and this is their experience now, or certain people are no longer in their life that they put a lot of pressure on that relationship, and it really kind of, they allowed that to hold them back from experiencing their authentic self. There is always hope. I call myself a hope dealer. There is always hope. And if you don't believe that, you need to get around a hope dealer and they'll get you some, because it's there. I've seen it. And for you to be able to see it yourself, I think can be extremely helpful. And that comes from putting yourself out there too. Because if you're sitting in that energy of waiting, that's anxiety. That is uncontrol or lack of control. That is uncomfortable. And that type of energy is not going to serve you. So instead, let's focus on the shift of, is there a possibility that there might be someone out there who has just been kind of looking for me? Or maybe there's multiple people out there who would love to have me as a partner, and do some journaling around that. If you struggle with even the thought of it, I feel you, I've been there. That's when you need a coach. That's when you need assistance. We have trouble sometimes when we have disabilities asking for help, because we believe, sometimes unconsciously, that this means that we can't do it ourselves, or that we're so dependent, or we're a burden. And that's a shift we got to have too.
Man, yeah, that asking for help, that's a whole label in and of itself. And what if the idea of asking for help and not wanting to do it is the one thing that's holding you back from the relationship that you've always wanted, but you don't know that it's available to you because you haven't asked for help to get there. I think that's huge. Asking for help is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you can't care for yourself. It doesn't mean that you're not independent. Like, we all need each other at some point. We all need other people, because guess what? People are on a spectrum of experience based on their life, based on their circumstances, based on a whole myriad of things. We all are on the spectrum of being a human being. And somebody's going to be further along than you where you want to go. So why wouldn't you ask for help? It's going to cut your learning curve down tremendously, your ability to ask for help. So that's huge.
Absolutely. And I see Jamie in the chat box saying lots of people have to start over as we age. Big time. Big time. And some will see that do-over as a wall, and that's going to keep them from moving forward and possibly having another relationship in their life. But then there's going to be others who see it as a fresh start, right? So it's important for us to recognize that. Oh, John, yes, years of distance relationships that need to be local. I was the queen of dating someone that was states away. Not even just like a short little drive. It was like a nice long distance just to make it that much more difficult. and with as being a coach, therapist, I was a therapist for over a decade. I've now shifted into relationship coaching. And in doing so, I've really been able to support a lot of people in making these shifts, because what we look at are our patterns. I had a pattern of keeping people far enough away so that they wouldn't have to actually experience my disability. That was my pattern. And I was able to recognize that. You drove for 10 years. Yeah. And so if that's something you want to shift, that's a shift that you can make happen. You said, I wish I knew who to ask for help. Well, we are all here for you. We're doing this next week as well. We're going to be here having a conversation, and we're doing this to support this wonderful community, especially during Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. It couldn't have been a better time, right? And then we will have opportunity for moving forward if you're wanting even more help. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I put down here at the bottom, you should see it scrolling. You can connect with Dr. Fynan over on Instagram or on Clubhouse at Dr. Fynan. It's spelled out there for you, and it will continue to go through. If you have any questions as they come up till our next time that we talk together, make sure and just message them on the page. We will get back to you as we can. And the more questions, the better. You guys are going to help drive this conversation. And this isn't about me or Michelle getting on here and talking. It's about having a conversation. And I've really loved where we've kind of gone today, because you guys have been so invested in the conversation. So I think we've hit something with what we're talking about for the rest of this month, the next 3 weeks. That's very powerful. And I see, before we close out, I see we've got people commenting. Let's see, what did Scott say?
Oh, Ben, I'm so glad.
Yeah. All I know of love is pain, because you're choosing pain. Wow. Yeah. Choices, right? And it goes back to, like, we've all made those choices. And as Michelle said, she at some point chose to keep them far away. And we're all making, if we're not where we want to be, the thing to remember is, like, we're making decisions a lot of time out of protection. Like, we're just trying to protect ourselves. So we get to recognize that. And often I think it's because we've faced so much rejection in our lives, in every area of our life, that this just seems like an easy way to not have to deal with the fact of rejection. I think that's something that I've seen play out in my own life.
That's huge, Nathan. And I think too, Scott, like it could be very easy to see this as yet another struggle because of my disability. Like, oh, this is yet another way that disability has negatively impacted my life. But that is a perception choice. Now, you didn't choose to have your disability, but we choose what we're going to do with that. And I think that it is freeing to recognize that there's a choice, but it's also important for us to be kind to ourselves if we've been viewing it negatively, because we do that out of self-preservation. Like you said, Nathan, we have that perspective for a reason. So be kind. We have to be kind to ourselves. The kinder we can be to ourselves, the more beautiful we can become, right? Because then we're projecting that kindness, and that's what we'll attract too. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, and I'll get vulnerable with the group and I'll share. So as a coach, I've got my own coach, and we've talked about coaching here. And so one of the things that I've been working through that I think relates to some of what we will be talking about in the future is this idea that all the way back in fourth or fifth grade, there was a time when, I was on field day, love field day.
Hate field day.
Right. That's my competitive genes coming out. But my group, we were in the final for the tug of war, and we lost. We lost to, it had to be fourth grade because we lost to fifth grade. And I remember walking into the room and a kid coming up to me and saying, "Hey, you're the reason we lost." And that stuck with me for a super long time. And what that did for me was tell me that I was inadequate. Whether I knew that at the time and knew that it would stay with me for as long as it did, I can tell you, I can remember that. And so one of the things that I had to work through was, okay, well, if I'm inadequate and I believe that, how did that support me? And by believing that, I didn't have to deal with rejection. It just made me not take as many chances. And what I learned along that journey was what it was really trying to, like, what I needed instead was love, and to show myself love. And walked through an exercise and said, "Hey, what does this part of you need? What does inadequate Igor need?" And it was a hug, right? And so in those moments, we all have that, quote, shadow self, where that inadequacy or whatever it is for you is going to show up. And it's about asking, "Hey, what do you need from me right now?" And who knows, yours might be a hug. It could be something completely different. But we have to do the work to even recognize that that's something that's going on.
I love that. And so if that doesn't give you a glimpse into the fact that Nathan is a fantastic coach, I don't know what will, but he leads people through those same types of exercises. And I've had the pleasure of being in rooms where he's done that. And I could kind of take off my coach hat and do some of my own self-reflection. And it's hard, but it's powerful. And we're hoping to do more next week. We would love for you to reach out to us. Let us know what really came through about this topic. What were your takeaways from today? Where do you want to go on Wednesday? Because we're here for you, and that's why we're doing this. So thank you so much for attending, especially those of you who were able to make it live. We can feel your energy. I know that's not just me. I know that we felt it too.
Yeah, 100%. Loved, you guys know, I love coming in and talking with you guys all the time. Definitely, Michelle, love that you are participating in this with us and providing your expertise here. I can't wait for next week. And as you see, we're going to be changing up the time a little bit for next week. So you can join us on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have to watch it on replay, it's still going to be there. Still ask questions because we're here to serve you. And I can't wait to see what we create over the next 2 weeks.
Good times. Have a wonderful day, everyone. We'll talk soon.